So, the next-gen systems are less than a month away now, and many are probably trying to decide which system to get, that is, if you can even manage to buy any of them at this point, and especially with the introduction of these new models, the Xbox Series S and the PlayStation 5 all-digital system, I think we need to start talking about what is actually going to be the best value, and that's what I want to discuss today. The pros and cons of each platform as well as model as things stand right now. Right off the bat, I want to address the Xbox Series S because it's by far the cheapest system, coming in at $300, a price so low, it's clearly meant to get people who care more about the price above all else. You know, I just want the cheapest thing, which there's nothing wrong with that, but those specs do have me worried. When you put this thing up against its counterpart, the Series X, you can see you're sacrificing quite a bit to get that lower price point. And we're already hearing some things. For instance, Yakuza Like a Dragon, one of the launch games. Granted, it's not running on a very well-optimized engine by any means, but we're hearing it's going to run at 900p on the Xbox Series S. So sub 1080p on a console that's also advertising higher resolution. I think they more so go for the 1440p for the Series S, as well as running games at 120 frames per second. But it's like, in reality, for a game to run at like 120 frames per second, what is it going to have to be in like 360p? Are we going to be doing old YouTube video quality? And I think the big thing you have to consider with that is looking further down the line. I mean, as these console generations progress, we're probably going to get only more demanding games. And it's feeling to me like those savings really aren't going to be worth it here. On paper, it's not much of an upgrade over the current Xbox One X. I just don't think this is going to be the way to go for core players. Now, I do think all these systems are for someone, and if you're a person that only plays maybe a few games a year, you know, you're someone who just gets like your Call of Duty and your FIFA annually and that's about it, and you more so use your console for like streaming apps, maybe the big savings is worth it there. But yeah, I'd be really concerned that as things progress and we get more demanding games that are designed specifically for next-gen hardware, that this system is going to lag far behind all the others. Now, the all-digital PlayStation 5 is totally different. This is basically just a PlayStation 5 without the disc drive, and it saves you a cool $100. That, I think, is way more enticing on just a base level. I actually think if Xbox would have done this, a Series X digital, which was just the Series X with $100 off without a disc drive, that would have been a fierce contender, in my opinion, for best value, especially when you combine it with Game Pass. Here, you're just not getting access to physical games, which, to me, that's not worth $100, honestly. I'm sure to plenty of people out there it is, but as I went over recently in that physical next-gen games video, I place too much value in being able to own the games in that, and I feel like a lot of the times you can get used games cheaper than they often go for sale for digitally, and I'd be pissed if there was a game on sale at like a Best Buy on Black Friday, for instance, for like $20, let's say, and maybe digitally the cheapest I could find it for was $40, like on the system's online store, and so I'd be in the situation where I couldn't pick up the cheapest version because I have an all-digital system. Again, if you're planning to go full digital already, this probably is the one to look at, I'd say, but I think over time you can get way more than $100 in savings buying used games as well as physical games that go on sale in retail stores. Which brings us to the big boys, the base PS5 and the Xbox Series X. Both are going to set you back $500. Now, specs-wise, they're very similar. Series X has the edge, but I don't think we're in a situation where third-party games are going to look drastically different on either system or something like that. Those extra few flops I don't think are really going to do much, again, especially for third party, as it's not a big enough of a gap where I think third parties are going to want to do the work necessarily to make much of a visual difference. The hard drive is also bigger. You got an 825 gig SSD on the PS5 versus the full 1 terabyte on the Series X. So you could install like an extra third of Call of Duty Warzone on there. And I don't know how those sizes factor in the OS and all that. Like, you know, when you have an X-size hard drive, that doesn't necessarily mean you have that much space to install games onto it, so that could be a factor. But when you also figure in stuff like backwards compatibility, the PlayStation 5 will support most of the PS4 library with boost modes to make them run better. while Xbox is going to support more generations, including the OG Xbox and 360 like they do now, so I think that beats out the PS5 only supporting the PS4. Also, Xbox seems to be going more consumer-friendly with the smart delivery stuff, giving you both the Xbox One and Series X versions when you buy a game. PS5 is doing some of that as well, but I feel like I've been seeing more of it happen on the Xbox. Also, Game Pass, the big factor. Xbox has so much value there, it's incredible. Sony again is trying to do some similar stuff with the PlayStation Plus collection thing, but they have a lot of catching up to do if they want to compete in that whole subscription space. So off of these broad terms, and with both consoles costing you the same amount, I'd say the Xbox Series X looks handily like a better value in terms of the specs and services it offers. But there's still one little tiny microscopic problem for them. You may care about this a little bit. The exclusive games, at least the console exclusive games, that you will be able to play on one system and not on the other. The Xbox is going to be in a really tough place to start this generation off. They lost the big launch game, Halo Infinite, so there really aren't any major exclusives on this thing day one. And that is amplified by them coming off what I consider to be a terrible generation with the Xbox One, in terms of exclusives at least. And these heads of the companies, they could come out and say all they want that, oh, this time it's going to be better, but it's like when you look at the launch lineup, I'm not feeling so good, Mr. Stark. You juxtapose that now with Sony, who have some killers coming early, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Demon's Souls, Ratchet & Clank, and not only that, and this is key to me, they closed out the PS4 this year big with The Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, both coming just within the last few months. So it's like, they didn't sacrifice a big final PS4 year to have an Uber PS5 launch. Sony just said, like, why not both? When you have Xbox, on the other hand, who's doing neither. The Xbox One is having a pretty weak final year, and the Series X and S don't have a strong launch. I think this is going to be really important to a lot of buyers. Just the mindset. There's a comfort here going off of what Sony did with the PS4 and how the start of the PS5 is shaping up. As a consumer, I have total faith, I have no fear about having consistent, big exclusives offered to me on this platform because they've been proving themselves year over year for a while, while Microsoft and the Xbox are doing pretty much the opposite. But Microsoft, while the actual release lineup is weak, has been weak, they're kind of a sleeping giant. The question is if they're going to wake up in time. They've been buying studios left and right, including their recent major $7.5 billion purchase of Bethesda, bringing their many studios, and I think it's like over 2,300 people total, into the Xbox family. Now, right off the bat, this is a huge mark for Game Pass, as all those games will now be made available day one on the service, so when your newer Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Doom, that Starfield game all come out, you'll be playing them on Game Pass day one. That's tremendous value right there. But it becomes even more valuable if these games are made exclusive and don't come to the PlayStation 5 at all. While right now we don't have any official word on that, Microsoft has been very coy about their plans, saying stuff like, making games widely available will be on a case-by-case basis, and Spencer recently said in an interview that they could make the investment in Bethesda work by just putting the games on their platform, Xbox and PC, but they've taken no firm stances on this. Myself, I've said I'd bet heavily that some stuff will be made available on the PS5. I think it's just a question of what. I mean, it was actually pretty recently Cuphead just came over to the PS4. Might only be games that are on that level, but if Bethesda is your go-to, one of your favorites, you love your Elder Scrolls, Doom and that, if those are the games you're most excited for, I definitely wouldn't go into this assuming they're still going to come to the PlayStation 5. Now, another issue here for Xbox is their track record with these big acquisitions. They've done plenty of big ones in the past that people thought were going to be game-changing. Buying companies like Rare, whose big recent game is Sea of Thieves. Ninja Theory, whose most recent game is Bleeding Edge. Obsidian, whose most recent game is Grounded. Not exactly games that set the world on fire. The track record of these big studios after being bought by Microsoft is poor, extremely poor, in my opinion. Now, maybe there's going to be better stuff coming. I know there was that Obsidian game that they're positioning as a true AAA experience that looked a lot like Skyrim, I forgot what it's called, but still, when you look at their recent history, I think it's hard to have faith. I mean, let's mention again, like, hey, remember when 343's Halo Infinite was going to be the big launch game until everyone saw it and said it looks kind of bad, so they delayed it into next year? Like, yeah, while Team Xbox is set to have a crap ton of development studios now, if the quality isn't there, the games aren't impressive, does it matter? If you have 100 studios and all the games suck, is that even worth having, like, just an Insomniac who's making Spider-Man and Ratchet and Clank? I don't know. If they do stop screwing around and start hitting some serious home runs this gen, I think they could easily turn the tide, especially with the setup of Game Pass. I mean, if you have that option, a small subscription fee, all the games are on there day one, and if those games were the quality of a God of War, a Spider-Man, etc., and were coming out at a faster rate with all these studios, I don't think Sony could beat it. But I have to keep saying it, the track record just isn't there. Now, before I get into my closing thoughts about these consoles, I'm going to be straight with you guys, and I know this is going to piss off a lot of people in a video about consoles. It's going to make a certain group very happy. I do think in terms of value, PC is going to be the best bet for next gen, just based on what I'm seeing. Yes, you'd have to pay more to build a PC from scratch, but over time, the trend with the $70 games, right off the bat, looks like it's going to be at least slower on PC. More games are listing $60 on PC, while at the same time bumping it up to $70 on next gen. Game Pass has PC support, so many of those big Xbox games will be there. And honestly, we're seeing more and more PS4 exclusives make their way over, like Death Stranding and most recently Horizon Zero Dawn. I do think with a lot of these companies, the thought process is kind of becoming more and more like, these games are stupid expensive to make, and after a few years, you've probably sold most of the copies that you're going to sell on any given platform. So at that point, why not open it up more and make more money off the same game? Like, honestly, if you're a PlayStation guy, answer me this. If Spider-Man, one of the biggest exclusives the PS4 had, ended up coming out on PC next year in 2021, would you really feel like you've lost much value in it as an exclusive, with it having been exclusive to the PS4 since 2018? I mean, at that point, I just don't think most care that much. I think once you get to the point of a game being exclusive for several years, people feel like it was worth having that console to play that game, and they've moved on to the next thing. So I think we can expect that to be more of a trend this generation, which will likely benefit PC players the most. So, Master Racers, you can cheer on in the comments. But in terms of the consoles, if I had to pick one, thankfully I don't, I'm getting one of each, but if I did, I'd have to go with the PS5, the base $500 model. If you are a digital person, I totally see your reasons for it, but I'm not at a point where $100 is worth sacrificing the ability to play physical games at all, especially in the long run. But yeah, I think that system is the safest bet right now. Who knows what the situation will be a year or two from now with the Xbox next-gen games, but as things stand right now today, it's not looking very impressive in the Xbox camp. And that's coming off an entire generation that also wasn't impressive. Yes, all the backwards compatibility stuff is great. I love what they're doing in terms of preservation. The feeling I get popping like my original Xbox disc into a new console is incredibly cool to me. But let's be real, most people are buying new consoles because they want to play new games. It's always been this way. I didn't cry, nobody cried, when their Nintendo 64 couldn't play NES games. And when it comes to selling consoles, the games are always, in my opinion, the number one factor. And going off of this past gen and what we're seeing already for next gen, I sure as hell wouldn't want to be missing out on all those amazing PlayStation titles. Anyway, with that, this video's a wrap. I definitely want to hear from you guys on this one. Going off of what we know so far, which of these systems do you think is the best value for next-gen gaming? What are people, myself included perhaps, missing in terms of the offerings of each of these systems? Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this discussion of the PS5 versus Xbox Series X and S in terms of value. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and if you want to keep the conversation going, hit me up on Twitter at Johnny Zakari, and join my Discord, Shy Guy and Friends, link to both in the description below, and as always, thanks for watching.